instructional coach. And it was just funny because just on my way over here, I was looking at my Facebook feed, and 2 years ago today was the day that I found out I passed national boards. So I was like, oh, that's perfect timing.
That's awesome.
And I certified in literacy, but as you know, most of the components, like the pieces, are the same. So we'll kind of go through this, talking about the 3 different kinds of writing that are a piece of the national board process, and then we'll have some time at the end to do some work and answer questions. So we're going to start by thinking about, also whenever I was in New York a couple weeks ago, I got to go to the Coaching Institute at Teachers College, and I spent a whole hour with Mary Aaronworth, who writes some of the units of study, and she did a session on talking about our teaching. So I'm going to kind of incorporate some of the work that I learned from her, as well as some of the stuff on national boards, so that we can kind of do a little bit of practicing. The first thing we're going to do is we're actually just going to watch this little video about this little girl who teaches this adult how to ride a bike for the first time. And I want you to just kind of think about how you would describe the little girl's teaching. Alright, so here we go. At the beginning of the video, she just kind of zooms through the grocery store to find a person. So I'm going to fast forward through that part. And this is her.
I will teach you how to
And I'm interested in learning how to ride a bike.
Let's go right now.
Okay, let's go.
Right now.
Let's go.
We're gonna start by getting our gear on.
Okay.
And to be safe and sorry.
Yes. This is the front or the back?
That's the back.
Okay. So I get on. And then,
And you're gonna come out like waddle like with your toes.
okay.
Like waddling like a bike. And I won't let you go unless you want me to.
Okay. Hold on to me. Okay. Okay.
Oh, I have a hard time. Keep pedaling. Keep pedaling. Keep pedaling. You can stop. You can stop. You did it. You did so well. You did it so
Including all the screaming?
Yeah, better than my first time. I'll do it for me, okay, Grace?
I'll start out like this.
I don't even care to go on like New Jersey. Just keep going. We're gonna ride.
We're gonna ride today for sure.
Crew members!
Oh, I feel like I'm riding.
You can do it. Good job. You guys. We're gonna slow down.
Let's turn around.
You can definitely do that again. Get the courage to do it again. Go. Go, 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 go.
Yeah.
Keep going. You learned how to ride a bike.
Yay!
Do you want to practice one more time?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Okay, so quickly with your shoulder partner, kind of talk about what you saw her do when she was teaching.
Hold it at first, kind of like how she was through her motion.
She related her own experiences too. She brought like her experience into it and put her at ease a little bit.
She was really encouraging the whole time. A lot of praise.
Celebrations along the way and like different benchmarks she was able to recognize. I think too, like it wasn't over when they achieved their goal. There was more. It was like, what are we gonna do next? You know?
Okay.
Are we talking loud enough to pick that up?
Oh, it's fine.
I don't know. So basically, what we were just doing when we were talking about this video is we were thinking of mostly what we typically do when we're describing our teaching, and that's just telling the what happened. So first she set her up a safety gear, then she kind of taught her how to waddle, then she put her on the bike, then she called in for reinforcements, then she held on to the bike as she let go, or then she encouraged her. So we kind of were making a list of the things that we do. So what we're going to talk about today is how the writing that National Board expects us to do is a little bit different than what we typically do in our everyday lives. So one of the things that we want to think about is when we're thinking of a level 4 performance National Board, these are the 3 words that they use to describe it. This is what it's one of level 4. That it's clear, consistent, and convincing evidence that you have those 3 things. And just so you know, a 3 just says clear. So consistent and convincing are the pieces that bump it up to a 4. Our 4 is our goal, of course, just because that's what we're trying to shoot for, knowing that you shoot for the moon, you land among the stars, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. And the piece that makes it clear and convincing evidence is the way that you describe what your teaching really looks like. So we're going to spend the next few minutes kind of looking through that. I'm going to give you some sentence starters and some tips to help you in the writing of that piece, and we're going to practice it again thinking about that video. So the 3 types of writing that National Board requires are descriptive, analytical, and reflective. So when we think about descriptive, we think about writing that really truly paints a picture. And this is what we typically are pretty good at as teachers, of describing what happened. So the descriptive is the what. You really want to think about when you're doing that descriptive piece, are you describing it in a way that the reader can get a really good picture in their mind of what was happening in your room? And then the piece that we really want to focus on for our National Board writing is the analytical and reflective piece. I'm going to show you a pyramid in just a minute about how they want descriptive to be a smaller piece and the analytical and reflective to be a bigger piece of your writing. So the analytical and reflective, those kind of vary between the why and the how you did something. So if we're thinking back to that video, we were thinking about the piece where she was encouraging her student on the bicycle. So she said, you can do this, you can ride all the way to New Jersey. That's what happened. And I used an example that kind of said exactly what came out of my mouth so that the reader has a really good picture of what was happening. Then what you want to do as the writer is you want to be able to explain the why and the how you did that. So it might sound something like, because this was a first-time student learning to ride a bike, I knew that I needed to encourage her, so I said, da 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 da. So that's the piece that is really emphasized in National Board writing, is that analytical and reflective. And whenever I think about this, like this analytical piece, it's really important to kind of think about the how. So my son is 8 now, but when he was like 3 or 4, my other son was like zooming down the water slides at a water park. And so my son Sage, super analytical, he's standing underneath the slides, like looking at all of the little pieces and trying to figure out how it was all fit together and how it was working. And that's what we want to kind of think about when we're thinking about our teaching, to be able to explain it in our papers. We want to think about how are all of the pieces fitting together to make it work. So this is the what they see, this is the how, and the why. And then there's always that reflective piece at the end, which they're usually pretty clear about in the prompts that they give you. They'll say, how could you do this? What would you do differently if you were going to do this again, or that kind of thing. So those are the 3 kinds of writing.
If it doesn't prompt you to, like with a question like that, are they still expecting reflective pieces to be within it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll kind of talk about that too. Also, this is from Simon Sinek, Start With Why. You guys are familiar with Simon Sinek? He's a leading author who wrote Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last. And he talks a lot about his business model, or thinking about the business world, but it also relates to teaching. And he has this example of this golden circle here, where we're thinking about, he actually says that businesses like Apple, who are big leaders in the industry, they start with the why. They don't say, this is what our product is, and this is what our process is. They actually start with, this is the why you need this. This is our purpose behind it, and then they go to the how, the process, and then the what, the product. So I'm going to share these slides with all of you guys at the end. There's a little video of Simon explaining it. It's a really good visual to kind of know where to start. So just a reminder that this is not, like we're not just listing it, kind of like we did at the beginning. That's what we typically go to as teachers is, first I taught me mini lesson, and then we did active engagement, and then I sent them off to read, and then, it's more like a list of activities rather than something like this, where that descriptive piece is a smaller portion, and then the analytical and reflective is much larger. Well, it doesn't mean that in the first page, you're gonna give a description, and then your last 8 pages is going to be analyzing and reflecting. It just means that when they ask you, they give you a prompt, lots of times they'll kind of clue you in as to what type of writing they want you to do. But it's always a good idea to give a quick description followed by more analytical and reflective piece. So, like if you're thinking of a paragraph, answering a prompt, like 1 or 2 sentences to describe, and then 2 or 3 sentences that analyze and reflect. So this is a good visual. It reminds me that my smallest part should be description. So we're going to look at the some critical components for the types of writing. This is just a 1-page document that was helpful whenever I was going through the process. Just take a couple minutes to read through that and thinking about thoughts that you have about it, and then also implications for your writing. So we're not going to do the share. There's only 3 of us. So let's just have a quick conversation. What were you thinking as you were reading through this?
Analytical is going to be the most foreign, I guess. I don't know. Not foreign, but like just inexperienced. I think we've all done a lot of reflection for different prompts and stuff. And I think descriptive stuff, I think that's maybe what we're more used to. More, I like it says for an outsider to kind of see as you see. So we'll have to be a little more careful with that. But just, in the moment, we don't think about our thought process.
Right. I was thinking
And when you're
about
reflecting, you're like, oh yeah, this could have gone better, but like, why? Right? We always say, so I think, what are we doing when we're on our, in the heat of the moment, how we're adjusting, like, I don't think about that anymore,
And I think that being mindful of it too, and maybe even just like having something to jot on, because like you said, like in the moment, it's like we kind of make those decisions, but as part of this, I need to be taking notes as to what I did in that moment and why I made that quick decision.
Right.
So, something to myself, because I feel like a lot of times when I go back, I'm gonna forget what it was that made me think of something to do it versus, something else.
Right.
And that's almost something to get into practice of now,
Yeah.
before really doing some of the writing. Just think, why did I just,
Right. To start thinking about that piece of why did I do it? How did I get from point A to point B? Okay. So that kind of answered the second piece of that, was like the implications for your work. We need to kind of start to think about those kinds of things now. So we're gonna do a little practicing with some tips. So when I was at Teachers College, Mary shared this document with us that's some tips for talking about teaching in powerful ways. And she kind of breaks it down into 3 different categories. So the first category is to use academic vocabulary. So just kind of look through that first page, and then there's a few more over at the top of the back side. See if you can quickly find a stem. So this is really helpful with writing. So let's see if we can find a stem that would work for us to talk about that video that we just saw. We may have to make something up too. But. So an example might be, I'm not expecting my student to achieve mastery today with the complex act of riding a bicycle, but I will be looking for balance, her ability to balance.
That last one, like I'll be looking for certain indicators of growth that may include being able to balance on the bike independently or 5 feet, something
Right.
like that.
Right. Today's teaching will help instill in students a repertoire of strategies related to balance and steering and self-confidence. And using the academic language of like today's work builds on the research of, so including that little piece in there. I don't know who the research is on bicycle, right? Okay, so then the second category that this document is in is to point out the invisible. That's right, this picture of the invisible man here. So that's what we were talking about, like those invisible decisions that we make every day in our teaching all of the time. How can we point those out to our readers? So that includes things like prior assessments, how the assessments that you gave informed your worker decisions today, ways that you'll informally assess as the kids are working, indicators of prior teaching and their habits, behaviors, and skills, how the current work builds on prior teaching or anticipates future teaching, the ways the kids have become independent, ongoing challenges, research, or things you're studying. So let's try that again with the video. What's something that we could say about our teacher and student?
Well, I would assume at some point in her life, she would have had some type of experience riding a bike. It's probably just been a long time.
Right.
So to maybe like
Builds
point
on
out
that.
the prior teaching or the prior learning that she's had and maybe when that was.
Okay. There's definitely some ongoing challenges. I was thinking about that, like ongoing challenges and studying might be steering.
Balance.
Right, exactly. And she definitely was informally assessing as she went because she did certain things as she was teaching. So we want to be able to point those things out. Like it might have been that she watched her, she kind of like let her ride first before she came in and helped her, that kind of thing. So that piece of it, making those invisible decisions that you make visible to your audience, that's really important for this type of writing. It's hard, but it's important. And then the last piece is to remember to describe and analyze. So as I've said, like there's those two pieces of writing. First you describe, but then you also analyze. So if you look at those stems there, they almost all end with the word because. So that's that why piece. So let's try that again. Pick one of those that we could use with the girl video. I love the last one.
The method I'll be using as I teach the bike is learn that because I think that would be a way
Right.
to start off for her. It's interesting, the last one you said, like I guess I was kind of told that it would be very dry and this seems almost like very personal. So I want to point out, so it's like it's this odd line of like you're talking to someone but you're not
Right.
trying to interest them in it. You're just
Right.
being very like
What
Yeah.
happened? Yeah, exactly.
nothing poetic about it.
No, nothing flowery, but it still is very, it's analytical in that way because, and I love the way that one sounds, like you may not be aware.
But like,
But
yeah,
I
but you're
wanna
talking
point
to
out.
like a robot, right? You're not even talking to like, you don't
Right,
want it to be
exactly.
something that somebody wants to read. You don't have
Right.
to make it interesting, but you have to talk to someone.
Right,
I think
exactly.
That's very strange to me.
It is strange, isn't
Because
it?
you're still using first person, but like.
Right,
And it's like everything we're taught is to make it interesting to your reader.
right, exactly.
This one's like, no.
Right, which is hard,
Right.
that's an adjustment in itself. So these tips, these sentence stems will kind of be helpful in your thinking about the writing piece, and I'm gonna give you some more in just a second. So we're gonna watch the video again, and we're gonna think about it through those two lenses of the visible piece that we see and the invisible. And this is really gonna help you to start to think about what you're doing now so that you can write about it. So one way to do that is to just write in like a G chart And this time as you watch, you can record over here on the visible side what you see. And then when we're finished, we'll give you a couple minutes to add, I saw this, so this might be what was the invisible decision behind it kind of thing. So we'll watch just a couple minutes. The video through a whole new lens. Get it all the way up to there. There we go.
We're gonna start by getting our gear on.
Okay.
Better to be safe than sorry.
Yes. This is the front or the back?
That's the back.
Okay. So I get on. And then,
And you're gonna come out like waddle like with your toes.
okay.
Like waddling like a bike. And I won't let you go unless you want me to.
Okay, hold on to me. Okay, okay.
Oh, Emma Hunter. Keep pedaling. Keep pedaling. Keep pedaling. You can stop. You can stop. You did it. You did so well. You did it so
Including all the screaming?
Yeah, better than my first time. I'll do what you told me, okay, Grace?
I'll start out like this.
I don't even care to go out like New Jersey. Just keep going. We're gonna ride.
We're gonna ride today for sure.
Crewman Max!
Oh, I feel like I'm running. Ah!
You can do it! Good job!
You guys!
Everyone slow down.
Let's turn around.
You can definitely do it again. Get the courage to do it again. Go! Go, 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 go! You did it! Keep on! Keep on! You learned how to fly!
Yay!
Do you want to practice one more time?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah. Remember to subscribe.
So now that we've watched it again and we were thinking through that lens of what did I see, now go back and try to fill out like what might be some of the invisible decisions that she made. So when I was thinking about you did so well, better than my first time, that's what we actually saw. So the invisible part of that might be that encouragement to build confidence. Like we'd all do that as teachers, right? So just take a minute to kind of see if you can put some things on the other side. And what's nice about this is even though this is bike riding, which is not what you do, all of these invisible things are pretty much the same as what we do as teachers. So let's just share out a couple examples. What was the visible? What was the invisible? Might have been behind it.
When she was like touching her back as she was holding it, I said it was part of like comfort, just showing that she's still there to support her.
Okay.
At some point she brought the crew in, and I wondered, did she have a preconceived number of how many failures until that comes in? What did she look for? Okay, now it's time for the crew. Because
Right.
that was obviously the time where she knew maybe that was going to give it the last, thing.
Yeah.
But like,
It was
what did she
interesting.
have back in there?
Is that we both thought about that, but we thought about two different things, and that's normal. Like that's what was gonna happen. So I was thinking about that too. Like, how did she know that this is a good time to bring the crew in? Probably because she knew she needed to build some confidence again. But there's also like that big term of gradual release of responsibility. hopefully assist you to get to that independent transfer. So another thing, just a helpful tip for you is like when you're thinking through this and you're like, I'm not really sure what it was, like if you get stuck on that language piece, you can ask your instructional coach, because we have all of those terms rolling around in our minds. But that is kind of helpful to think about that way. So this is even a good strategy for you to kind of think about, like when you walk away from a lesson that you're pretty sure you're gonna use, or a conference, or something like that. If you're doing your component where you're doing your videos, this is a great strategy to kind of think about, this is what I did, this is why I did it, or how behind it. Okay, so, and you can also have some more tips for you that we can use as well. This is from Kelly Mueller, who does the Fall Frenzy, February Frenzy for national boards. So basically, she just talks about, again, when you're describing, you'll know because they'll ask you to explain, list, or describe what something is. So be short, say enough to paint the picture, but then stop. If you look at the third bullet about concentrating on facts and details that show an impact, that's really important because there are a lot of things that we could include, but if it doesn't really impact the teaching or the learning, then it's something that we probably could leave out. Same thing with resist the urge to tell everything. Details matter, but don't go on and on. Description should be the smallest portion of your writing. Following the suggested page limits does help. And then I like the last tip there about supporting description with details and examples, but not too many. So like if you think in your 12-page paper, you probably like if you have descriptions and examples, like maybe 1 or 2 times where you said the kid said this, or like to have those examples in there to paint that picture, but don't overuse it because it takes up space for one. But and then in the analysis section, again, those are some really great sentence stems for you to use. If you were to read my paper, you would see those 10 stems over and over, just reworded in different ways. I love the rationale behind my decision. I think I might have used that a little bit too much. And then on the back, the whole back page is about reflection questions. And again, you'll know when they're asking you to reflect because they'll usually say something like, what would you do differently? Or were these goals appropriate? How did they do? Or how does this impact future instruction? And then if you look at the bottom there, again, some sentence starters for reflection. So we haven't talked about reflection yet. Let's think about that with the video. We could think about how this, I now realize that my student needs a little more work on steering.
Yeah. But it was helpful that the crew came in because it built her confidence. I feel like it was the right time to bring them in.
Mm-hmm. So in the future, I like will use that as a strategy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could even say the significance of the crew coming in was to build her confidence, and that's a strategy I would repeat in the future. Yeah, and remember that National Boards is not looking for perfect. They're looking for this piece, this analytical and reflection. So there should be something that you would do differently. Actually, I mean, you want to be crazy with
Always is, man.
There always is, right? We walk away and like, oh, I really wish I would have done that differently. Right. Let's see. So this is just a quick reminder: describe, analyze, and reflect. Make the invisible visible. So whenever you're looking at your prompts, they will usually be very clear in what they want you to do, but some are not quite as obvious. So a good strategy for you to kind of do is to kind of look through and think about, okay, so this one says clearly, describe. The instruction designed to meet your short and long-term goals. So that's pretty obvious. They want you to do a quick description. Then analyze how areas of the student's weakness were strengthened. Some of them are less clear though. So this one would be how well were the goals in this instructional sequence met. So a little bit of description might be necessary, but really more of that analyzing and reflecting piece. Or a question like this: how did you establish safe, fair, equitable, and challenging learning environment for all? That's a mouthful. It's like 5 questions in one. Don't you love it when they do that? I'm like, oh, great. But that piece of how did you do that is really important to make sure that. So when you're looking at your prompts, it's actually a really good idea to just kind of go through, and if it doesn't tell you, to like write a little note next to it, analyze. So the biggest takeaway that I have for you for today is to start writing. No matter what, the water does not flow until the faucet is turned on, and I think that's very true. Just remember whenever I was going through the process that once I sat down to start writing, it's always like the first word, like I don't really know where to start. Just start typing something and then go back and revise it. So whenever, yeah, exactly. Whenever I was working on mine, I think I wrote it very quickly, like probably, 5 or 6 hours quickly. But but then I spent months, literally months, revising it. So it was just more a matter of let's get it on the page and then we can go back and revise it. And these stems that you guys have, and you may have other ones as well, those are super helpful in trying to make sure that you have the kind of writing. Do you have any questions about the kinds of writing? No? Okay. Is this helpful for you?
Very.
Okay. And yeah, I loved your idea starting to think now about some of those invisible decisions that we make as teachers. So we're going to use the last little bit of time, maybe not bring you to, but to do some working, or if you have questions about your component,
Maybe